This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast, and I'm so excited. Probably the most excited I've ever been because I've got possibly the most reluctant guest that I've ever had, but probably the one that I know the best. Maybe not apart from Lilia, who was on a few weeks ago, but I am so thrilled and honoured that she's agreed to come on, and she's got so much to share with us. It's very possible we might be joined by some four-legged friends during the conversation, but it wouldn't be authentic without those people joining us. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to our amazing community today, Laura Dutton of Qui Recruitment. Hello, Laura.
Hi, Lysha. I'm loving the fact, by the way, that my jumper coordinates with not only the chair, but your nails as well.
My nails,
Like we
and
planned it.
for those who are not watching, you can actually press video on Spotify now, but if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the Manchester Memorial photo. And then I think you've got, is it Chinese lanterns? And it's totally coordinating.
There we go.
Sadly, I think they're Man United colours, and obviously that goes right against my City. And in fact, I've got red behind me.
There you go.
It's all matching. Now, I cannot believe that anyone in my community doesn't know who you are. But let's just say they've been hiding under a rock for the last how long have we worked together? 9 years plus the 20 odd years and prior to that.
I think, is it not our 10 years next
We're
year?
10 years next year. Well, we know it's 10 years next
Yes.
year. We possibly booked a little cheeky trip to go away and celebrate. But just give us an overview of what you do, who you are, and I want a really good story as to how we've ended up working together at Qui Recruitment.
Well, we have worked together. That was bound to happen, wasn't it? And we have worked together since my very first day in recruitment. So we met, it was 21 years ago on the 28th of July this year that I started at PFJ.
28th of July 2003.
2003.
Wow.
Yes. Oh, yeah, 2004. I can't remember. It was 21 years. Yes, yes, that's right. 2003. 3 days before my 23rd birthday. And you were running the Manchester Rec to Rec division, or Manchester division office, I think, when I joined as a trainee recruitment consultant with Man Wong, with Liv, Niall, and Ed, who are now over at Sphere, and obviously JK, who's over at Creative.
Vicky Hughes started.
Yeah, as Dawn Stockdale, and then with the Charlotte Mullin, who was the manager, who's probably one of the people that's had the, I guess, most influence on defining my 21-year career as a rec to rec. So it was there. Yeah, learned my skill there. Was actually slightly upset when Charlotte put me on the rec to rec desk because I'd gone to PFJ to go and have a really cool career in media sales, and they taught me into recruitment and then put me on rec to rec rather than any of the really cool desks. But in hindsight, they made exactly the right decision because I became one of the most successful recruiters there, and had a lot of fun doing it as well, learning my trade as a rec to rec, and then one of the managers. And I guess that's why we're sat here today, 21 years later.
It feels like 21 days later. So you joined Qui Recruitment London, where you formed Qui Recruitment because we're business partners in 2000 and so we're 2015 because we're 2025.
Yes.
And just give a definition as to what you actually do and what sort of people you partner day to day.
Yeah, well, at the time, we were way ahead of the curve, weren't we, in hybrid working? It was like, but I'd done a sort of a 10-year stint in London, obviously at PFJ, then at various other rec to recs, and then in my latter years launched Lowthbry, which was my own recruitment business, with the help of Paul Marsden and Adrian Kinnersley, who I knew from Asbury Marsden. Did that for a few years. And then all of my friends started moving out to like Hertfordshire and Surrey and all of that sort of stuff. And I came home and I can remember meeting you at Christmas. And Katie was pregnant with Darcy. And I just didn't want to go back, wanted to move back. So I met you. We hatched a plan to move me back to Manchester, which I did in March. I had a couple of years doing bits and pieces. And then we sat down and decided that we should be working together.
Where's Marriott? And I remember your dad came
Did.
just to check I wasn't some kind of crook.
Yes.
You have to meet Daddy Dutton, everybody. It was that. Do you know what? It was such an amazing moment because I remember confiding in a couple of like advisors at the time and, you know, chatting to them about, I think you were maybe were looking at sort of going into the market with you, and they were just like, you need to go into business together. And it was just such a no-brainer, wasn't it? So yeah, God, that feels like I feel like you were right. We were ahead of the curve with the hybrid, but I think actually we've always been ahead of the curve in how we operate because of how we go about doing the business. But so just in terms of what you do, because people might be thinking, well, Qui Recruitment London, why is that different to Qui Recruitment? So just explain what Qui Recruitment London does.
So we work the London rec to rec market, only senior hires. Most of my placements and most of my relationships revolve around the tech sector. Just what I have always done. It's where I gravitated to in terms of the market. God, all of those years ago as a 23-year-old. And it's pretty much the lane I've stuck in for the whole time. The London rec to rec market is different to the Northwest or the Midlands. It's so vast. And so I don't think you can be really good in the senior rec to rec market in London unless you've got a niche that you sit within. And I think that's probably what stood me in good stead 21 years later. And actually many of my candidates, many of my clients, many of my colleagues and my friends are people that I've known and have worked with in a capacity as a candidate, a colleague or a client over that 21 year. Everyone's always like, oh my God, you know everybody. I'm like, yeah, been around unfortunately long enough too.
Yeah, 21 days apparently. It's just gone really fast. I think for me, when I talk about on this podcast, I talk about a lot around the ecosystem of recruitment and what most people are striving for in whatever walk of life they're in recruitment, which is to create this like nemesis of an inbound model. And for me, I do often, and I know you don't listen to the podcast very often, but I talk about you a lot because I say what you've done is how recruiters in whatever market you're in, when you're listening now, whether you're recruiting finance, lawyers, HR, you will have a peer group. And that's how I think every recruiter should start out. You recruit your peer level and then they grow with you. So they become your ecosystem. So your clients now were your candidates that you placed.
Yeah.
You know, some of my clients, they've moved up to the Northwest. They were people that you placed 20 odd years ago in their first recruitment roles. And I think for me, you embody what true relationships look like. And I don't know whether there is science to it, Laura, but just talk me through how much design that is and how much naturally people just need to create, I guess, this mindset of having a long-term relationship and not just going, because you share a lot on this on LinkedIn. We are going to come back to your LinkedIn prowess, by the way, around the sort of overnight success story of placing people. Where do you position your mindset with that?
There is no overnight success story, if only. There are definitely on occasions doing this job, quick wins which happen, but they are few. If I look back over the hundreds of placements that I've made, and God, can you imagine how many have we put together, mine and your number of placements that we have made? There are a handful of those. And actually, if I look back just at let's just say the last 2 years, there are people in those, look at the 3 guys that I've launched through Recruit Hub. Those people were in process for 2 years. The guy that Piers, who I placed at Turley Way, 10 years I've been speaking to him before our paths crossed and I was able to help him find a new role. And is it, for me, there is no science to it, which is probably why we had this conversation about why I wasn't the best manager, because to me, doing this job, building those relationships, being in it for the long term, it just comes naturally. It's just the way I am. I'm not invested in it for quick wins. I don't think you can be invested in it for quick wins, and enjoy the job. But those long-term relationships for me is why I enjoy the job.
Yep, that's your why and your before we started recording ours, I've actually just been a guest on someone else's podcast, and she was asking me around behaviours of top billers, and I guess to try and unpick what that looks like, and everything that you've just said to me is what makes a top biller. I do want to come back to the management piece, by the way, because I think it's really important that we talk about which sort of people should be put into leadership roles. But so hopefully I'll remember to ask you about that. But I think so. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if it is a science per se, and I personally think it's a nature thing. I think you are either inherently curious and see the bigger picture, or you're not. And I don't think you can necessarily train things like empathy, being naturally inquisitive about people. But I mean, especially the London market, I mean, it's probably the most competitive rec to rec market. And I don't know if that's based on data or just based on what I see. How do you position yourself then, regardless of these relationships, to make sure they come to you and no one else? Like, how do you do that?
Well, I don't know. You should probably ask my candidates and my clients. I can think of one that's just made me chuckle, who would say fear. He wouldn't go anywhere else or talk to anybody else because he would know that would upset me. But it's not. But it's a conversation that we had that's made me giggle. It's not at all. And because I'm speaking to these people all day, every day, it's not transactional. It's not about quick deals. It's about speaking to these people all day, every day. Whether that be checking in and on how work's going, or whether it's checking in because I know that they've had a baby, or because they're getting married, or because somebody's told them that they've done their first deal. But I think because I'm checking in with these people and speaking to these people all day, every day, even when they're not looking to hire, or even when they're not looking for a job, I would assume that when it does come to them hiring, or when it does come to them looking for a job, because we're having conversations all of the time, both professionally and personally, I'm the one that think about picking up the phone to. And they also trust me because of those relationships, that those hires or those job opportunities can be confidential to them.
Yeah, I think I actually agree with everything that you said, which is why we're so compatible together. That for me, it's not seeing a short-term win. It's not thinking, oh, I'm going to place that person here. It's seeing the bigger picture and doing what's right by them. And you're like me in the fact that you get to know everything about that person, whether it's a client or a candidate. You don't see them as like a commodity. They're a real person, right? And I think that's the important thing. I want to just, before we come back to the management bit, which I do, I've put it up here, I've pinned it. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about phones, because you're very prolific and very vocal on LinkedIn, particularly around the reticence for some people. And I'm not going to talk generations here, because I think it's age appropriate to every generation. I think there's people that I've worked with in 20 years ago that didn't want to pick up the phone. Why do you think there is a fear of the phone?
Absolutely no idea. But then I've never been scared of the phone. And I guess that comes from after I was old enough to work in a call centre. I worked in B&A, selling credit cards. I worked at Marks and Spencer's Financial Services, selling home insurance. And even while I was at university, I worked for Johnny Evans at Discovery Recruitment, which was actually a graduate recruitment company. But they sold, do you remember the sweatshirts that you used to get, the campus clothing sweatshirt when you finished university? And they used to have all of the name of the year of, So Johnny owned that. And at uni, he employed me to pitch it out to the US universities from completely cold. So I guess I've just always, you couldn't have fear at MBNA when you were selling credit cards, because it was a power dialer. There was a beep and there was somebody in your ear and you were off. Like 300 cold calls a day. But I don't think that you can get, I personally can't get the information in the granular detail that I need to do this job well, doing it via text messages. You can't understand tone. You can't understand what people mean. Even when they're saying something, there are different messages in there. And even to this day, much to you, because you love a voice note or a WhatsApp, even when I'm talking to you, for me, it's just easier to pick up the phone.
Of course it is. I think, you absolutely, I mean, I am a lover of voice notes, but they are not there to replace the phone call. They are there very helpful.
No.
If you know somebody's not able to pick up the phone, you know that they can probably put the phone to the rate. And if not, you can just, I use, I'm not going to say the name because my phone will start beeping, but the SIRI function in the text message to dictate
Right.
it. I do use that, the microphone a lot. But I totally agree with you. And I think gone are the days where we need to sit there and do. I mean, that sound. I've just had anxiety. The dialer and the 300 calls a day. I mean, horrible. Please may I speak to Mrs. Jones? Nobody needs to do anything like that anymore. And I think that's where there's this kind of misconception that if your company's asking you to sit there and cold dial 100 people, that is not the way to do business these days. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is having, a meaningful conversation. The only way you're going to build a relationship, the only way you're going to build trust is by, if you can't meet them in person, which for me is the best way to do it, you do it on the phone. Because you can ask questions, and it's about active listening. It's about picking up on buying signals. It's about not following the script that you probably have to follow at MBNA because it's FSA regulated, but actually going, well, hang on a second, like just pause what you just said. What do you mean by that? And you can't do that. And I it just beggars belief. And for me, I mean, you and I both know that the recruitment industry is going through this insane evolution at the moment. And the only way to protect yourself, I believe, as a fee earner, is to have meaningful connections and relationships, and the only way you can do that is by speaking to people.
I just don't get it. Like we spoke about one candidate that I had personally not that long ago, and we spoke to somebody else that he knew, and he was at final business planning stage with a business, and he'd never had a conversation with his recruiter. Never. And I was a bit, and how are you adding value to any process as a recruiter if you're literally sending message? Like, how do you, I just don't get it. I don't understand it. And actually, funnily enough, that candidate that we spoke about actually ended up coming to me and asking me for help. Doing another recruiter's job for them, I guess. But yeah, I don't get it. I can't. I don't think there's any replacement for conversations with candidates and clients.
No, I totally agree with you. That's integrity right there. I'm going to unpin this now before
the management thing.
So you said rightly so, for you have managed teams before.
Yeah.
Gone down that leadership path, and you recognize that was something that wasn't right for you personally or professionally.
Yeah. Definitely.
So many companies that we either partner or don't partner, potentially recruit people from, seem to put people on this trajectory. Where, in your experience, where did the best leaders come from? Like, where should we be looking internally from a succession planning point of view? Should it just be the top billers, or should it not?
No, actually, well, it depends, and I don't think there is. I can't. There's no way that you can say top billers don't make good managers, and there's no way that you can say all bad managers are top billers. Like it just doesn't work like that. But some of the top billers that I know, me included in that, after going on a journey, would make the worst managers I could potentially think of. And some of the billers who are billing 120 to 150, actually I've seen characteristics in them that would make them incredible managers and incredible leaders. And so I don't think it's one size fits all. I think it's down to business owners and business leaders and working with the people that they've got working with them to work out what it is that they want out of their career, and also what it is that they are good at. I know I'm a shocking manager because the way that I approach this job, one, as we spoke about, it sort of comes naturally, which means a lot of the time I can't formulate why I get it, so why it is right and why it does fall into place, because it just does. It just does. But I am chaotic and I am impatient, which means I'm not very good at following structure. As you will know with our CRM, I'm not very good at following structure. I guess probably one of the reasons that I've been so successful is because I am a bit like that. But then tell me to manage 3 or 5 new trainees that are coming into the budget. The other thing is I'm too selfish. I want to make money for me, right? Like
Yeah,
my
that's your
motivation.
driver.
And it took me a long time to get it took me a long time, because when we started, the more you build, the higher up that you went, and the higher up that you went, the more the better the job title, the better the package, the better the status, and everything like that. And it wasn't PFJ's fault back in the day. I definitely know, because I was gunning to go into that management job, because at that time that was progression, whereas it isn't now. And actually going into that management job at and I going into that management job so early on in my career, based purely around the fact that I had outbilled all of the peers around me, wasn't the right decision.
No, I agree with you. I'm really glad that we brought that up. I really am. But while we are talking about top billers, it's a nice segue into, in your professional opinion,
Yes.
what traits, if you can define them based on what you've just said, what traits should leaders listening be looking for in hiring people to ensure that they get the best future top billers into their business?
Oh God, do you know what? If I look at all of the, it's crazy, isn't it? Because if I look at the people in my phone, let's just say I can think of 4 right off the top of my head, £1 million billers, and then I can probably think about another 10 straight off the top of my head that sits somewhere between that 600 and 800k, like good billers that I've known for 10 15 years. I don't think there is one thing that defines any of them, other than the fact I can categorically say none of them got to where they were without working hard.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely that. But the other thing is they've all, I would say, what we touched on before, which is it's not transactional, it's about long term, it's about relationships, it's about adding value to their customers, it's about adding value to their clients, it's about adding value to their team. But in terms of actual kind of they're all just so different.
Which I love that diversity, but I actually think you've answered the question, because I got asked that on this last podcast I've just been on. And I said, for me, they build trust in their client relationships, and they become that go-to person. And the only way you do that, and this is what annihilated the expectations post-COVID, is you cannot just walk into a business and become a top biller. It takes years of consistent process management, activity, working harder and smarter than anyone else. And I'm not here to enforce any toxic behaviour at all, but that's the reality. These people are not rocking up at 10 and going at 3. They're not. I'm sorry.
They're just not. And we can touch on somebody that we both know in Max, and it does come down to them consistently doing the basics and doing them well, and even when they're not seeing the results, just being absolutely relentless in knowing as long as they consistently concentrate on their input, their output will reward them.
Yeah, no, totally. Now
quality input, obviously.
Yeah. Now you are a self-proclaimed Recruitosaurus Rex. Can't remember what you call yourself. What is it?
Recruitosaurus. It was one of your clients that called me.
I know it was.
I did a post about it. Is the phone about that guy that was at final stage? I did a post about is the phone call dead in recruitment, and I was like, I'm pleased to be called a grandma if that means picking up the phone and actually speaking to people. And one of your clients coined it as a Recruitosaurus, which now me and Alex Hutchins both absolutely. If that means I'm not going to be replaced by AI, if that means I'm actually going out to meet people, having actual conversations over the phone with my candidates and clients, I am more than happy to be called that. In fact, I'm honored to be called it.
Do you know, somebody called me a dinosaur on someone else's podcast? They actually name dropped me, and in the same sentence called me a dinosaur. And I think it's really funny. And whenever I go, I'm not going to name his name. He knows who he is. Whenever he comments or I comment on his, I always sign off with a little dino, and he's not picked up on it. And it's really funny. So I'm really glad that you've alluded to, and it's not a topic that you're an expert in, nor am I. Where do you see us in terms of, like, we're recording this to launch it in 2025. Where do you think recruitment will be in 5 years in relation to what I think are traditional recruitment values, that personal relationship, speaking to people on the phone, with the way that AI is kind of, I guess, sweeping us all away. Like, where do you see it?
Well, I hope I still see myself here doing the same things that I am. I like. I haven't used and I don't use ChatGPT for anything. I think I once used it when it first came out to write a poem about recruiters, just because I was lacking in LinkedIn content for the day, and I thought, oh, this will be fun. And so I don't really use it. But a couple of times recently, I actually had a friend who was outside of recruitment that needed to draw up a tenancy agreement because she was renting a room, and we literally spoke into ChatGPT what it was that we wanted, and within 10 seconds we had it back. When we were looking for places to stay in Lisbon, again, just spoke in, and within like 3 seconds spoke it back. So I think it definitely has a place in the job that we do, and we're lucky now, after a few years, that things like content and a lot of the marketing stuff that we produce does come naturally. But I do think there is a place for it in that. I think a lot of the software, we've got something being used now which is taking notes on everything that we're saying. All of that is brilliant. But I still think, even in 5 years' time, as long as I'm picking up the phone and adding value to my candidates and my clients, I'll still be around.
100%.
And so do you.
I agree. Oh no, I agree with you. And you know, going into meet a client and candidate you've placed and giving them a hug and sitting with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone the other way to you, because I was quite late, I think, in the ChatGPT kind of adoption. I've just been like, oh, I don't need it, because I could write content for the next year and still not run out of ideas. I'm just one of those very lucky people. But I have found it amazing for getting facts, finding Lisbon, recipe ideas. You know, it's I would never use it to write content. But for example, I wrote a post, as we record this now, I wrote a piece about International Men's Day for the mental health stats. And rather than going onto Google and typing it into Google, I literally put, give me some stats. And within 5 seconds, it had all the sources, all the stats, which were all horrific. And I did not copy and paste what it gave me. I just chose a couple of the sources and then shared that. So I agree with
I actually saw as well. I saw yesterday another fellow rec to rec had not advertised. I put a post on LinkedIn asking for how he would go about compiling a list of recruitment businesses in New York for a BD list for it. And somebody had commented, ask ChatGPT, and he replied and went, I've just done that. And he had a whole list for stuff like that. Brilliant.
Amazing. And that is what we should be using AI for.
Yes.
And not, you know, you could even, I mean, I've done it a few times because obviously I'm training up Lilia at the moment. So, you know, give me a list of examples of questions that a recruiter should be asking for an interview. Yeah. And obviously I've got what I've been training her in for the last few months. And I got her to compare the two, and she went, the ChatGPT list was absolute dog shit, Mum. She didn't swear. She actually doesn't swear as much as me. And when I reread it, I was like, it's so generic. But if you were starting out a training guide for your internal training team, it'd be a good starting point.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, I've had on this podcast now for 5 seasons, I must have had dozens of people on where we've talked about AI and automation. I love talking about it to an extent, but then I kind of get a bit, right, you know, we've talked ourselves into and out of it. I think for the way I see it, it's a bit like when you used to get your iPod shuffle, or you used to go and get your albums. Sometimes it's nice to go old school and get an album, put it on your turntable and play that one album. But other times you just want to ask Alexa to play the top hits from 1986 because you just want to live your Rivals. Oh, sorry, she's going off. You want to play the playlist from Rivals because it's amazing. And I think that for me is what it will do to recruitment. The equivalent of that, it will just take away all the boring stuff that we all really don't enjoy, but all the brilliant stuff, all the having conversations, you know, getting deep and dirty in the process. So I'm with you on that. Now, you have become a bit of a viral LinkedIn queen, haven't you, dear?
I have to, just this week, yes.
She has. No, you have you I want to know your journey about
Yeah.
LinkedIn because you've obviously been in recruitment a very long time, but you've really only kind of, I think you have owned LinkedIn really the last couple of years, sort of post-COVID. So just talk us through, I guess, I want to get into your mindset because there are lots of leaders listening that are still reluctant because it's something ludicrous, like it's only about 1% of LinkedIn users actually post regularly. So I want you to talk to that one person that's reluctant and tell them why you kind of have gone through this journey and what you've seen the benefits for you.
I was the reluctant one 2 years ago before obviously Sean called me from Hoxo, having been our partner on this very sponsor on this very podcast, and said that he thought there would be value in me going on the course. I was really reluctant. I'm not on social media. I have Instagram, I have TikTok because my nieces have put it on my phone, and actually I'm not quite sure how to get rid of it. I've got Facebook because back in the day we had Facebook, but I don't have, what's Twitter called now?
X.
Yeah, don't have that, and I don't have the other.
Threads.
No, don't have
Blue
Threads.
Sky. There's a new one
No.
called Blue Sky, right?
No, none of that. None of the what's the Snapchat? Yeah, no, none. Literally.
Darling, we're too old for Snapchat. That's
Yeah,
just
I'm an absolute social media dinosaur, and I'm quite happy to own that as well. Don't post very rarely, and I'm not an oversharer, and that's what I always felt like it was when people post on LinkedIn. Anyway, I went through their personal branding course, as did you, but was told that if I was going to go through it, I had to actually do what they told me that they were going to say. Shout out to Aaron, who was obviously my coach back in the day. And with their structure, when you first start posting on LinkedIn and you're trying to find your voice, a lot of the stuff that they tell you doesn't feel authentically you, but what it actually does get you into is a routine of the types of things that you should be posting. And one of the biggest things that it does is it gives you a bit of structure. But one of the things that they told me is that every conversation I have with a candidate or client, write it down and use that as the formulation of your posts. And you will see, if you go back through all of my content, most of that now is actual conversations that I have with candidates and clients. And actually, because it is actual conversations that I've had with candidates and clients, most of my candidates and clients now say they even read my posts in my voice rather than
that's really funny.
which I think it actually genuinely means like I'm authentically me on LinkedIn.
Oh, it is
such a cliche. But I now post 5 times a week, sometimes 4. Thank God I've got the dogs for days when I'm lacking in content, because that always helps. And I would say 85% of the revenue that hasn't come through referrals in the last 2 years has come inbound through the content that I've produced as a consequence of that.
So it's worth a lot of money. And I love that you've kept it quite simple with your answer, because I think for me there's 2 action points. One is that anybody listening can share ideas on LinkedIn from what is actually happening day to day. And for me, it's all about notes on your phone. I have got at any one time about 100 ideas. When you don't, by the way, we're not naming names here. That's not what we're saying. It's just you can keep it quite open and generic, but you don't need to then overthink it. And I think for me, you aren't an oversharer. And I think that's where most people probably sit. I think we're probably the binary. I'm happy to share everything. You're not. And I think, but the fact that you have equal amount of people coming to you inbound from LinkedIn that I do, it proves that you don't need to overshare. You just have to do what you feel comfortable with. And yes, I mean, Richmond and Daisy, I can't believe they haven't joined us, actually. I'm very impressed with whatever bribe you've given them.
You don't want to know.
I'm not going to encourage them to come on, but they can come and say hi at the end. But anyone listening, you can utilize whatever. It could be going to the gym, it could be a walk, it could be a holiday for the personal element, but it's not constantly that. Yep. It's about balancing it with that, the formula that Hoxo does teach you, I think works, because it's ensuring that you're keeping a blend throughout the week and it's adding value to your audience ultimately. And I think what you've just said there, I'm so chuffed for you that you found your voice, because it is your voice, it is so you. And when I sometimes read something, especially your ranty ones, I'm like, this is Laura. This is Laura. Look, and I obviously know the situation because you very rarely share it when it's just happened. We tend to all do that. We kind of all wait a bit. But it's brilliant because what it does is it really engages people and it makes people think, oh my God, this happened to me. So it makes people feel seen. So I'm so pleased. What would your advice be then to, I guess, making sure it's a continuous thing? Because I think some people maybe still don't see the value of it. A lot of people think it's just a rec to X haven, but actually, there's billions of people on there.
Oh, and actually, funnily enough, one of my neighbours is a techie. And was out of work. Was out of work, was looking for a new contract. When the market wasn't great in the middle of this year, and we were having a conversation. You saying, "What's the market like?" And have you got any tips for me? And the first thing they do, don't they, when they know that you're a recruiter, is they send you their CV. And it was shocking, and it needed tearing up and work doing on it. But the other thing that I'd said to him is, while you're not working, I'd recommend you doing some LinkedIn homework. And I shared the LinkedIn, the 20-10-5 rule that we all started working with. And told him that he should 3 times a week try and produce some content to engage with his audience, which has got nothing to do with our audience. And 3 weeks later, he got himself a new job.
The proof is there.
And he is a techie. He has nothing to do with recruitment. He's not. He's an app developer.
There you go. That's how techie Laura is.
yeah. He's an app developer. What it did. Even though, and his content would have nothing to do with ours, but what it did is it got him having conversations with people on LinkedIn that were relevant to his market and him back in the market. So I don't think it's just exclusive to recruiters. I think as long as you're producing content that's relevant to your network and your communities, everybody should be doing it.
And it does not, even though he did it in 3 weeks, it wasn't overnight.
No, it wasn't. No.
It's consistency, isn't it? Oh no,
the thing is, he's still doing it now. He's a contractor, and so you want to keep your network fresh, don't you? If you're moving, but like us, you want to keep the people engaged in your network, so that when they are looking to hire or when they are looking for the job, you're the person that they come to.
Laura, how has it been doing your first podcast interview?
Actually, it's okay.
Okay. I think you need to get on more because you've got so much experience and such a wealth of knowledge. And, obviously this is why we're in business together, because you do everything the right way. You've got integrity. You're still smiling after 20 odd years.
Just about. I'll be quite pleased when this year is behind us, though.
Yeah. I mean, as we record this now, we're at the back end of 2024. When we say it's possibly going into the new year, I think 2024 was harder than 2008, 2009, which were pretty terrible years. And I think if you're listening to this and you have survived 2024, do I think 2025 will be easier? No, I don't. But if you've made it through this far, keep going.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I actually think I was in the worst market that I could have been in because I was placing IT recruiters into financial services in 2008 and 2009. So yeah, exactly. So that was pretty grim. I think that was probably a bit harder for me just because I was so pinned in one market that got impacted so badly. But I just pivoted and did other markets. And now, even though I'm in tech, my client portfolio is much more vast than just IT into financial services. But this year has been tough. This year has been way tougher than last year for me. And I think you're right. I think 2025, everybody gives it. I'm cautiously optimistic about it, but I do think it's still going to be hard work.
It will be hard work. To me, this is how,
Isn't it always hard work?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, recruitment is hard work.
It is the job. And I think too many people have come into recruitment post-COVID, and I feel a bit sorry for them because if they thought 2021 and 2022 was how real recruitment was, they got a massive, massive shock in 2023 and beyond. But if you are listening to this and that's you, I think this is it. I don't think we'll have another 2022 because all the things that collided at that time to create this bubble, I've never seen anything like it, neither of you. I actually hated 2022 because it was frantic, it was a frenzy. You knew that if you got a candidate, they'd be got off the market in a week. The inflation of salaries, which obviously then is why we were in such dire straits as an industry last year, because you had all these overpriced candidates on the market. So yeah, disparity. So I agree with you, and I think, you know, I'm a lifer like you. I adore this industry. There are certain days or moments where I think, what the hell have I done to deserve this? But generally speaking, the majority of the time, I think we are doing an amazing job helping people, and like you create friendships, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, these people are your confidant.
Although I was about to say, I don't say that because that post about candidates and clients, it's scarred in my memory. That post about candidates and clients can't be your friend. That's what got me put in LinkedIn jail for a week.
Yes, I remember.
So the less said about that.
Yeah, no, probably best not.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have you got any parting words? Because our listeners, we do get a lot of leaders, but we get a lot of newbies. Have you got any pearls of wisdom for them, Laura, for anyone that's in their first recruitment job or starting out?
Oh, best thing about recruitment is the people. The worst thing about recruitment is the people. But for me, 21 years in, as long as you're willing to put in the work and put in the effort to build relationships, it's actually a really lovely job today.
Yeah, that's a gorgeous, gorgeous way to finish this amazing interview. And thank you so much for just being amazing. I love our chats, our will to write chats. If anyone ever needs a will to write chat, this is your woman, because you'll probably get Richmond and Daisy barking in the background. I can't believe how well behaved they've been.
Like literally
drugged them.
No, they are there. They're just they've got their tunes, which have done exactly what
it's done exactly what it's meant to do. Thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.